Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. You're listening to episode number 51 of the Lean Blog Podcast for October 13th, 2008. I have a really special guest today. He is retired Lieutenant Randy Russell from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department in Jacksonville, Florida, and he's going to be talking about their efforts starting back in 2004 to use lean methods, lean thinking, continuous process improvement to improve law enforcement. So I know that may seem like an unlikely place to use lean, but I think you'll learn a lot from listening to Randy in both this part and what will be part two coming in future weeks. As always, thanks for listening. Well, again, our guest today on the Lean Blog Podcast is Randy Russell. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here.
I was wondering if you could, basically just start off by telling us your story with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department, how the department got started with Lean, and how you got involved with it personally.
Mark, thanks. Those are great questions. As you're aware, and your guests are probably becoming aware, that law enforcement is just now becoming exposed to Lean, and it's really kind of exciting to be in the beginning of that. And how all this worked out was John Rutherford was elected sheriff in Duval County in 2003 and took over and asked our city auditors, the sheriff's office auditors, to take a look at all the processes, and particularly the ones that involved financial streams. And during this, they got to a unit called the forfeiture unit. And they found a situation where an officer who didn't have a lot of supervision had squirreled away $500,000 in cash in a filing cabinet. Yeah, well, this guy is an unlucky individual because he had just finalized a divorce. He had travel plans to leave the country, was retiring the next week, and no doubt planning to take that money and go and do other things with it. Well, anyway, he's a prisoner now. And the sheriff realized that, he needed to start fresh with having the processes run as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And Maxine Pearson, who was our auditor at the time, told the sheriff that the Jacksonville Electric Authority was having some good luck using Lean. And JEA is our kind of quasi-governmental utility company here. And they were having really good luck with it. So we started a continuous improvement unit in 2004, which is right after this episode with the filing cabinet money and stuff. And Maxine and Renee Chandler were the initial continuous improvement unit, but on top of that, they still had the auditor duties. So they really couldn't go full-time with it. And it was becoming clear that the results that were coming out of this were pretty positive. One of the initial successes that they had, just doing a voice of the customer and leaning up a copy center function, we were making 89,000 copies of general offense reports a week, and they were distributed to different units. And not everybody needed all of these reports. In fact, frequently, what they were finding out was, 2/3 or more were going in the garbage.
They were overproducing reports, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Classic case of overproduction. And you can imagine, all the back-end waste that drives that, too, because now you got to have more paper to support this and, so on and so forth. Well, they went through the event, and at the end of it, wound up saving 3.1 million copies a year. And we're a good-sized agency, but that was a big number. Now, later on, I did a little bit of figuring on that, and that's about $12,000 worth of paper, and that's substantial, but I mean, it's, in contrast to $1/3 billion budget, it's not a world stopper. But here's the most important thing, is that 34% reduction in the copies resulted in a 3.15 million copy a year reduction. If we only spent 1 minute handling each one of those pieces of paper from the time we order it, receive it, copy it, distribute it, people get it, carry it, look at it, then throw it away, haul it off. If we only spent 1 minute on each one of those pieces of paper, which is probably conservative, we just saved 52,000 man-hours.
So the time was the biggest factor then, it seems.
Right.
Yeah.
52,000 hours is 25 employees, 25 full-time employees. That is a big number. Now, their pay packages, so just in the recovered labor, we're talking 2 comma money on that one little deal. Well, things like that told the sheriff, we need to make this full-time. So in 2005, I was coming off of being the lead planner for Super Bowl 39 in Jacksonville, and that was a really awesome experience and opportunity, and just fortunate that it went really well, and a lot of people worked really, really hard and did a great job on that. And Under Sheriff Frank Mackesy gave me a CD and said, look at this. Well, it was the training material for the Introduction to Continuous Improvement class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I said, man, this just makes sense. This makes perfect sense. And he asked if I wanted to be involved in that. Absolutely, I want to be involved in this. This is, why do we do these things that don't make sense?
So I'm curious. So you had this video about lean, continuous improvement. I assume it was a manufacturing-based video, and there was also exposure to an electric company. It's kind of fascinating to see this spread of ideas across different industries, and I guess what was behind the openness to look outside of traditional law enforcement practices?
Wow. Well, that I tell you what, you're asking great questions. Absolutely, it was a cross-pollination of ideas. And the CD at the time that I looked at actually was the training material from the Jacksonville Lean Consortium. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about them probably throughout the podcast. Excuse me.
Okay.
The Lean Consortium right now is about 47 companies and government organizations that are all kind of pooling their resources to share lean best practices, and it's really going well here in Jacksonville. And I was fortunate enough to be the chairman of the Jacksonville Lean Consortium here until just recently when I retired. Well, it was the training material from that. And so what we had was not only the electric company, but manufacturing companies here in town, the Navy, and others, and a collaborative effort. So the training material came from a wide variety of things. Now, we since took that and made it very law enforcement specific because our officers asked us to, and we were responding to our customer, and that was a wise choice, and it's worked out very well.
And was speaking of Jacksonville, was our good friend, the lean dentist, Dr. Bari, involved in that effort also at that point?
Dr. Bari, my dentist.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, I chose him because I was in the consortium at the time, and got to meet Sammy and realized what a bright fellow he was, and went to his office, and this guy is absolutely lean. Having come from another practice where you'd sit and wait 2 hours to get 20 minutes worth of work done, to go somewhere where you don't even sit down until you're in the chair, you walk in, you see it. Yeah, it's amazing. So, Dr. Bari, I'm sorry, I missed the initial question. I'm so proud of my dentist. I would brag on him every chance I get.
Well, it's good to hear from a customer perspective. I think a lot of our listeners have heard the discussion I had with Sammy about his practice, but yeah,
if you ever go to a lean dentist, you'll never go to another one.
I think it's hard finding a lean dentist. I wish I could here in Texas.
True that.
Yeah. So I think I got you off track a little bit. We were talking about the cross pollination of ideas across industries, and so it sounds like there were some at least initial openness from a leadership perspective, and then a process of trying to adapt that for the police force. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair to say, and it's probably the biggest challenge. We're fortunate in that there were some visionary people involved in the beginning here, because it isn't a direct translation, and it takes a little bit of being able to see the application across industries. Now, I think that Lean is enjoying widely that phenomenon, where people are seeing, this is not just a manufacturing thing. This applies well, in fact, maybe even better, to administrative processes, to service industry processes, to even some processes that one wouldn't think of as being, very lean-oriented. So in the beginning, we recognized that we had a lot of opportunities that we could apply this to, and we're willing to try it out, and they were great fits. And that continued, and I'll be honest with you, I'm just going to confess this to the audience. I was a conventionally trained MBA, and when I was first exposed to this, I don't know that I was believing it. It sounded too good to be true. I had spent 20 years in the government. I was used to things that gave 1% and 2% improvement.
Yeah.
And, things that were supposed to be giving me, 75% and 90% improvements, I really needed to see that. And for about the first 4 to 5 months, I'm involved in this, doing these things, and getting these phenomenal improvements. And I'm wondering, wow, is this real?
Yeah.
What if I tell people, are they going to think I'm crazy? and you know what? The more you do, the more you realize this really is working. Mm-hmm. These are absolutely verifiable results, and we validated the application that way. I mean, It was one of those things. We didn't go into this, with this Pollyanna attitude that, this is going to save the world. It was like, okay, prove it. And you know what? Lean proved it over and over again, to the point to where I can remember being in my office thinking, this is a game changer. This is going to be to law enforcement what CompStat was to law enforcement. And the CompStat was when New York City started using very fresh computerized statistics to go after crime in a focused way, and they completely changed their crime dynamic there. Mm-hmm. When I saw the effects that were happening with this in our business and realized the opportunity, I knew this was a deal changer.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to have that proof that Lean works, rather than having it be a faith-based exercise of just of a theory. I mean, I think there's no shame in being skeptical at first and wanting to have it proven out. And I'm guessing you must have faced a lot of skepticism amongst the officers and everybody.
Still do.
Yeah. So how do you get past that barrier? Because I think that's a very common change management issue, whether it's in healthcare or different non-automotive parts of manufacturing. People say we're different, right?
Yeah, we're different, just like everybody else. And police are the same way. They feel like, we're the police, we're different, and so there's a couple of ways of dealing with that, and this could benefit your audience a lot, because we all run into it in this improvement game. What you find now is that, like I said, I was worked my way up through the chair of the consortium, and so I've been exposed to everything from mom and pop machine shops to multinational healthcare providers to police departments, military. Everybody's got the same problems. In this, here's how we dealt with it. Initially, find out what's causing them pain. What's causing the troops pain? Because I have a theory that headquarters likes to take care of itself. But go find out what's causing pain in the rank and file and apply an event to that problem and clear it up.
Yeah.
Now you've taken away their pain. They're happy. They like you. Mm-hmm. You solved a problem for them. So this isn't just something now that management's doing, trying to make them do because it's good for management. No, it's actually good for them. And so in the early going, look at those things that are irritating to touch, things that are causing them problems. I used to tell folks that I was running a pain management practice, and an epidemiology practice. So I would hear what's causing them pain on one hand, and then how bad is it, how widespread it is. Well, if it's painful and widespread, those are great things to start on. Now, I'm not saying, you don't want to try to tackle world hunger right away, but you go after those things, and now what happens is you win a bunch of fans that'll help pull it from you. That's a much better problem to have than trying to push it out onto people who are resisting you.
Yeah, I think that's a great general lesson about not going out and saying, oh, okay, we're implementing lean, but to go out instead and to help solve people's problems, help them be more effective.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's really what you're doing. So if you package it that way, it's a whole lot easier to swallow.
Yeah. Now, did you do training or use any of the lean terminology when you talk about reducing pain? Did you talk about waste, or did you try to sort of keep away from some of those terms that people might associate with Toyota?
Okay, early on, the training material that we had inherited through our membership in the consortium was very manufacturing specific. Mm-hmm. And so we did get a lot of advice on, maybe making it a little bit more law enforcement oriented. And we listened, and we did. But I don't think you can talk about lean without talking about waste, because to me, it's really one and the same. We were given everybody 8 hours of introduction to continuous improvement training initially, so it's basically all day. But we were realizing that there were some really painful parts in the afternoon on metrics that were difficult for the instructors and for the students, and for the most part, this was familiarization training for these troops, and they weren't going to be doing a lot of those fundamental calculations anyway. So we cut it down to 4 hours. We went through it and said, okay, what do they really need to know? What are the core philosophies and history of this, and everything. And we got it to 4 hours with some simulations, and that has been very successful. In fact, it is our policy to train everyone. And so everybody gets 4 hours introduction to continuous improvement training. From there, they can then go on and get training in becoming a 5S facilitator or in Kaizen facilitation, which is a lot more training. And may even work their way into the continuous improvement unit where they're running events all the time.
Yeah. So maybe stepping back.
Can I finish one thing?
Go ahead.
The terminology. We made a decision that we were going to use the minimum amount of, in particular, Japanese terminology, and at the same time avoid using very law enforcement specific jargon. So what we did was we those things where there is no commonly accepted English translation, we left the Japanese term in place, because that's what they're going to run into when they talk to people outside of the agency that do this. We wanted our people to be conversant outside of the agency, but without having to keep a Japanese English dictionary in their pocket. So there was definitely an effort to tailor the terminology, not to completely scrub out the Japanese or to completely scrub out the manufacturing or to completely convert it to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. We wanted them to be able to converse with the broader lean community and not bore them with police jargon or make them have to learn a second language either. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry. So that was my speech on that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was wondering if we could go back to the timeline a little bit, where you had said, 2004 was some of the initial thought. 2005, it was made a full-time program. What's the progression been over the last 3-4 years?
Okay, great question. What what happened was, they started the unit in '04. It was part-time. Then in '05 went full-time. I came on board then, and we did some events. This is really working out. We need to go ahead and get everybody trained. So from '05 until now, there's been training for everybody in the core concepts like we've talked about. In '06, it was really kind of doing the pain management, and there was some of your audience can appreciate this, management dictated events that weren't necessarily connected to the larger strategies for the organization. And so in '06, we were kind of doing just a random collection of stuff, learning what to do, and at the same time kind of learning what not to do or how to do things better. So then in early '07, went to the sheriff and the undersheriff and said, there's 3,200 people in this organization, and there's only a few people who are doing this full time, and we're not going to get to everybody.
Yeah.
So we've got to have a fundamental rethink on how we're doing this thing. I said, right now we've got a pyramid, and it's upside down. So we've got all the stones resting on a few, and that's just not a very functional way to get this out to the masses.
Was that team running Kaizen events? Was that one of the limiting factors then of how many events they could be involved in, or what was the structure?
Well, that would be one of the limiting factors. We just didn't have enough percentage of people properly trained and actively doing it.
Yeah.
That and critical issue was, where did the responsibility for doing continuous improvement rest? At that point, it rested with the continuous improvement unit.
Okay.
Right. So these dozens and dozens of middle managers, upper and middle, and even first-line managers, it's not on their to-do list.
And that's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
But it's a critical concept to getting this into the larger organization. So the sheriff saw the wisdom in, we need to invert the pyramid, for one, and have everybody doing this. And the responsibility shifted to the operational commands.
Yeah.
So that, basically what's on somebody's to-do list or somebody's boss's to-do list gets done. So I said, look, this has got to be on management's to-do list. It's got to be on yours, and then, it rolls down through the senior leadership of the organization, and then at each level, people are going to salute smartly and go do it because their boss said, hey, we need to be doing these things. We need to get better. We need to be looking at our processes. That was the thing that changed the game for us, because now the horsepower in the agency is applied across the organization. Instead of having this kind of boutique situation where you've got this, very highly placed but small little salon doing continuous improvement for the organization, it's going to take a long time for everybody to get a haircut.
Yeah.
Now you've got everybody at least trained up to be a barber, and everybody's getting haircuts on a regular basis. Well, that's a much more powerful and effective paradigm. So, the pregnant moment was when the undersheriff said, so what's your plan? And I realized I was staring at a bunch of legal papers with handwritten notes on it, and I didn't have one. And went and looked for good plans. And I found an extraordinarily well-done plan that is really translates well into organizations of almost any size, all the way from small units up through an organization the size of the Department of Defense. And that is the Department of Defense's Guidebook for Continuous Improvement.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenally well-done document. I think it is a seminal document on how to do continuous improvement in organizations. And one of the things that I am proudest of is recognizing the value of that thing and making some adaptations to law enforcement and getting our administration to sign off on using that as our guidebook.
Yeah.
It is a soup to nuts how to do this thing, based on a lot of other people's good and bad experiences, and I'm firmly of the opinion that if somebody else has a bad experience, I don't need to have it with them to benefit from it.
Yeah. Now, is that DoD document, is that by chance a public document that
it is.
Could go look at online?
It is. It is
Okay.
the Department of Defense Continuous Process Improvement Guidebook. The one that we had was dated May of 2006, and it was basically put out by the Undersecretary of Defense for their elements.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm sure I'll post a link to that on my site, but people can go Google that phrase, I'm sure, and
I'll try
find
to
it.
see what I can do to send you something.
Yeah. And what I like about all that discussion, we're not talking about lean law enforcement anymore. We're talking about lean. I mean, those are general questions everybody's struggling with. How to get the line managers and the day-to-day frontline staff involved in continuous improvement, right?
Yes, absolutely, and that's good. And I'll tie back to two other points. One was everybody's saying that we're different. Well, and police very much feel like they're different. So one of the things I would ask them is, do we have more vernacular than the military? Mm-hmm. The answer to that would be no. Do we do things that are more unique than the military? Again, no.
Yeah.
Do we have a longer, more storied history than the military? No, again. So if the military, for all its uniqueness, can do this and do it quite well and be way ahead of where we are now, then troops, you're different like everybody else. Come on, let's get with it and stop the stalling techniques.
Yeah.
And so that applies to everybody else, whether you're holding a scalpel, a pistol, a rope, a soldering iron. So I just wanted to loop back to that, is that it is about doing lean, and not just in law enforcement or in healthcare or in education or in manufacturing or in the service industry or the administrative industries.
Yeah.
It applies everywhere. The concepts are so generic that really it's up to us to make them more specific.
Yeah.
And the fact that there were some specific examples in the beginning that had to be genericized, the concept started as generics. It's just going back to those.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.